Gotcha.
Thank you, Arabella. All right. Oops, get stuck a little bit. Hello, everybody, and welcome, and thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to kick off to frame a little bit the context of why we're here and hopefully also share a little bit of an announcement of what's to come. But I think to start off with, a lot of you, I'm sure, are also wondering, at a time when our world is suffering from climate change, conflict, food and water insecurity, and overconsumption of resources, it can be very difficult to understand why we must also prioritize nature, biodiversity, and species, and why we need them to create a more sustainable, stable world. The key thing to realize, though, is that nature and species do not exist in isolation. They are all interconnected. We are all interconnected. A single species interacts with others in ways that produce multiple benefits to people, like clean air, clean water, and clean and healthy soils for efficient food production. And these are the ecosystem services that we all rely on for our everyday survival. Since 1970s, the world has witnessed a 69% decline in global populations of mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and much of this loss is caused by habitat destruction, it's caused by climate change, which is why we're all here today. And as nature reminds us, it is not able to cope with the amount of immense stress that we are placing on it, affecting our natural habitats and affecting the species that reside within these habitats. And what we tend to forget now and then is that humans are also a species. We're all here and we're a species too. And the loss of biodiversity, the loss of nature impacts us all tremendously, limiting nature's ability to support us whilst reducing our resilience. Nature, however, is also known to be one of the greatest allies against climate change. We don't always realize this, and every time I say this fact, it gives me a little bit of goosebumps. But every single tree and plant on Earth has made its entire body wholly out of carbon. And it stores a significant amount of carbon dioxide in its soils, acting as that carbon sink, reining in climate change. We must protect nature so that nature can protect all of the species on this planet, including us. But what does that mean exactly? It's sometimes hard for people to truly understand. To overcome this, we need to notice nature, and that is really why we're all here today, because we know the role that it truly plays. A large part of environmental conservation is learning about our species, learning about our plants, our animals, conducting biodiversity surveys to really understand how many are there, where are they threatened, what are they, and how can we prevent the threats that nature and our biodiversity is facing in our backyard. We take these insights into consideration to inform those conservation strategies and environmental policies before we enter into the monitoring phase. And then we ask ourselves another sort of questions, another set of questions. Are these interventions working? Is nature recovering? Are populations of species increasing? By doing this, we aim to ensure that strong, healthy ecosystems and habitats are thriving, and they continue to provide us with those services that we rely on for our survival. But why is this relevant to us in the UAE? We may live in the desert, but the country is full of life. If you are out in the Arabian Gulf Sea on the sparkling blue waters and snorkeling beneath, you might catch sight of dolphins. Yes, it's rare, but they are here. You might catch sight of sea turtles, of sharks, all species that we actually work on as Emirates Nature WWF, and also dugongs. And all of these species and animals are grazing on our underground meadows of seagrass. And not a lot of people are aware of this, but the UAE has the second largest population of dugongs in the entire world. Across the coastal lagoons and islands that also dot the UAE shoreline, to the Rocky Mountains to the east, are hotspots for unique biodiversity, for diverse habitats that are sheltering thousands of animals, thousands of species that are threatened by our warm temperatures. They're threatened by our arid landscapes. They're threatened by our high saline conditions, yet they've found a way to adapt in this harsher environment, in this place that we all call home. Animals like the Arabian oryx and snakes, many beasts like lizards and scorpions and toads and water-wise plants like date palms, acacia, moringa, or the shua tree. Life is abundant even in unexpected places. The flowers that adorn urban green areas and parks, even the ones that we're around here today, and attract those precious pollinators, such as our bees and insects, who are essential for urban biodiversity to thrive. Collecting information about wildlife, about marine life, as well as their habitats, and monitoring these trends, this is a huge job. It really is a huge job, and there's only so many environmental scientists out there in the world. However, everyone can contribute towards growing this pool of valuable scientific data, working alongside environmental scientists as citizen scientists. By mobilizing collective action, we can learn and achieve so much more. And we can do it quickly. And in fact, we're already doing this through our Leaders of Change program in the UAE. Working with esteemed partners, Emirates Nature, WWF, has been building these pathways for everyone in society to be a part of this movement. And this is through the Leaders of Change, but it's also through a community that has now become 4,000 members strong of corporate, government, youth, individuals who are ensuring that there are thousands of boots on the ground for environmental conservation and thousands of minds co-creating solutions. Notice Nature is one of the landmark initiatives of the Leaders of Change program. It's newly been innovated and funded by our partner Mushrak. I have the music behind me to celebrate this announcement. And we're driving the way to encourage everyone to notice the many remarkable species and habitats that surround us, appreciating their value, and helping us scientifically document how to best protect and restore nature in the UAE. I invite you all here today to join the movement, become a leader of change, and find out how you can contribute to climate and nature goals as citizen scientists through the latest Notice Nature initiative in partnership with Mushrak. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank my mini ones here who've been watching me do the speech just now. Yay. Inspiration for everything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leila. We'll pass that on to someone else. Cool, wow, okay, so very, very inspiring words there from Leila. I think what's super important for me is for us all to remember that we are nature. It's not that we're separate. It's not that we're some sort of engineered machine. We are animals. We need to be in our natural habitat, and we need to protect our natural habitat, and it supports us. So if we think about all the things that nature gives us, right? If we think about every breath that you're breathing, that oxygen was made by a plant. Everything I'm wearing, cotton, whatever else I've got going on here, that's also come from the ground, or it's come from nature. The iron in my blood was at one point in the earth, right? I am nature. And I want to share with you now a poem. It's one of my favorite poems that really brings that message home to me. So hopefully the clickers. Ooh. Hello. Could you advance the slide, please? Thank you. There we go. Okay. So the water in your body is just visiting. It was a thunderstorm a week ago. It will be the ocean soon enough. Most of your cells come and go like the morning dew. We are more weather pattern than stone monument. Sunlight on mist, summer lightning. Your choices outweigh your substance. There you go. You used to be a thunderstorm. Did you know that? So I think it would be really nice to take a minute to just thank nature for all that she does for us. Maybe you want to just have a little moment with this beautiful music going on in the background to think about all that you receive from nature. Maybe you have some feelings of guilt. Perhaps there's stuff you want to apologize for. Perhaps there's something that gives you hope. Take a minute, just a few seconds, to just really reflect on that. I've got a video, hopefully it's, oh, no, we need the next slide. Got a little, oh, sorry. Can we go back? Yes. This is one of the wadis in the mountains of the UAE. Did you like those pictures that we're showing behind Layla's speech? Every single one of those is something that we find here in the UAE. So I don't know how many of you are from outside of the UAE. Can you put your hand up if you don't live here? A few of you. When you were thinking about coming to the UAE for the first time, were you thinking about pictures like that, about these gorgeous water pools and wildlife? Probably not, right? But the UAE does have amazing nature, and the desert as well is not a wasteland, it's a very valuable habitat. So did you know that you can actually measure your connection to nature? So eco-psychologists around the world have created this series of short questions that if you answer them, we give you a score out of a percentage of how connected to nature you are. So that's the next slide. Hopefully my clicker's working. Oh, the video's working. That's lovely. Look at this dragonfly in the background. We love dragonflies. Dragonflies have 360-degree vision, and they can eat huge numbers of mosquitoes. So we particularly like them. Take care of dragonflies when you see them. Okay, so have a quick scan of this QR code, and I'll give you a second to just work out how connected to nature you are. You'll get a score. I would like everyone to do it, if you've got a phone. No pressure. I need to get out of the way, okay. It's anonymous, so even if you know me, I can't tell, so be honest. It's not homework. This is real. So it's just 6 questions. And so when it comes to your connectedness to nature on a psychological scale, on one side of the scale you have humans are superior, we can engineer our way out of any issue, we are above nature, we can change it however we want. And on the other side of the scale you have, I am nature, anything that I do to nature to damage it damages myself. So those are the 2 ends of the scale. Let's see where you fall. I can see you're all busily. I'll give you a second to think. "92% up here at the front." Should hope so, Layla. You're the Director General for the UAE's environmental charity. Anyone else want to shout out your scores? Anyone got their score yet? Go on, Andy. How much did you get? 26. All right, you need to join our program for sure. What was that? 71. Well done, well done. 49. 84. 92. Oh my gosh. Well done, Tamara. Proud of you, proud of you. What was your percentage? 100. Amazing. Okay, well, even if you were at 100%, there's still a lot of fun you can have connecting more with nature. So Layla briefly mentioned our program, Leaders of Change. And Leaders of Change is really that community of nature lovers here in the UAE. And not just people who love nature, but people who want to protect nature, who want to learn more, who want to get out in the field with our scientists, who want to be a part of this initiative that we're talking about today as well, Notice Nature. It's very exciting. We have over 100 events every year. We're a busy team. And you see some of these pictures. These are some of our trips. So did you know that scorpions glow under UV light? Anyone know that? And that's how we survey them. So we go into the desert at nighttime and we look for scorpions, we find snakes sometimes, we find beetles, geckos, all sorts of exciting things. That's called Nature at Night. We put you to work at Leaders of Change, but in a good way, we get you to help us restore the mangroves, but not just plant the mangroves, also measure their growth. So that tree that you've planted, is it actually growing? Is it actually absorbing that carbon dioxide that we need it to? We're building foliage systems up in the mountains. Anyone know what a foliage is? Only one hand there. Do you guys know what a foliage is? It's an ancient irrigation, style of irrigation channel, and it was used historically to take water to the farms and to the villages. But these days, people tend to use pumps and pipes, and what that means is that the wildlife can't access that water. So historically, there used to be these open channels that were like streams, but now all the water's kept in a pipe. And also, if you've got a pump, you're extracting more water than nature can cope with. So we're restoring these ancient foliage systems, and that means things like those dragonflies that are eating all of the pests. Birds can come and access that water, and then they're like pooing on the farm and fertilizing it. So foliage systems are very nature positive. So we've been working with farmers to do that. So I really do encourage you to join Leaders of Change. So another part of Leaders of Change, which Layla briefly mentioned, was citizen science. So citizen science, in case you haven't heard of it, has anyone heard of citizen science? Some of you, but some of you know. Well, I'm going to wave my magic wand now. You're all scientists. Congratulations, you can put it on your CV. All right, so essentially, citizen science uses the concept that you don't have to have a PhD to be doing science. There's certain elements of the work that we do as scientists that aren't very hard, that you could do just with your smartphone, that you can do as a regular person. And my job actually is to design ways for citizen scientists to come and help us with our research that we do out in the mountains. And my journey with citizen science, and I apologize to my team who've heard this story a million times, but my journey with citizen science is quite long, but the really significant moment came when I was working on a beach in Abu Dhabi, and my job was to protect turtles, critically endangered hawksbill turtles. Now, these turtles are reptiles. They live in the sea, but they breathe air. So when they crawl up the beach to lay their eggs, if that nest is too close to the sea and the water goes over the nest, all of those baby turtles, those critically endangered baby turtles, drown. So one of the things I needed to do was sometimes move the nests higher up the beach. And it's quite a tricky job because baby turtles, when they're in their egg, their embryo attaches to the shell within 9 hours. So you have to move the eggs very carefully, and you have to move them very quickly. So I used to get up extremely early. All my friends were very tired of me going to bed at 8 p.m. and waking up at 4 a.m. I was no fun for a whole of the turtle nesting season. My job was to walk along the beach, find these nests, check if they needed moving, and move them. And each turtle nest has up to 100 eggs in it. So if I manage to save a turtle nest, that's 100 individuals of a critically endangered species. And we think there's only 200 nesting females left in the Arabian Gulf. So that was a big deal. So I would do this every day, walking along the beach, checking for turtle nests. Then my brother decided to marry my best friend in the middle of the turtle nesting season in England. So I was like, great, thanks guys. Do I save the turtles or do I go to the wedding of my brother and my best friend? What should I have done? What should I do? You guys are all nature lovers. Most people say go to the wedding. What I did was I realized there's a lot of people in the community who really care about nature, really cared about turtles, that have very sophisticated, essentially, computers in their pocket with GPS, with cameras, with the ability to zoom me from the middle of the wedding and be like, what do I do with this turtle nest? Is this a turtle nest? So I went to the wedding, but I trained up my mates on how to deal with a turtle nest if they found one. And that's citizen science. They just learn how to do a small piece of the puzzle, and they saved the day and let me go to a wedding. It was great. So citizen science is something that we're going to do today. We've got a field trip after this talk, remember? And what we're going to be doing today is citizen science to notice nature, to notice the small things as well as the big things when we're walking around Expo. We're going to find some wildlife. And this is all part of our new initiative with Mashrik. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Kartik from Mashrik, who's going to talk to us a little bit about why at Mashrik they think investing in nature is so important. So over to you. We've got the mic.
Hi, everyone. I'll try to be brief. At Mashreq, we are all very excited about the future and the opportunity to leave the planet in better shape for the future generations. And that's manifested in some of the things that we are doing, such as climb to change. I think the theme for today in my head is that everyone can contribute. And so as a point where we thought we could contribute, the change that we made was that we said we will use 100% recycled plastic for all our plastic cards, right? That's one. The second thing we did was we said if somebody wants to get a Mashreq card, they should be able to do it without printing anything, without submitting any paper. So we did that. And when we send out communications to our customers, we were using a lot of paper in that, so we minimized the paper that we send. Everything is electronic. Even the card that comes to you, the card carrier is minimized. It's just a very small envelope made of recycled paper with a QR code in it, where you can go on the web and check out anything that you would like to see about the terms and conditions or what benefits you're getting and when is the gift coming, right, and so on. But that's not all. If you look at the newly redesigned cards that we have, every card is telling a story, and that story is about one part of the ecosystem that we are in. And inside the intricate designs of the plastics that we are sending you, you'll find one element of the ecosystem that we are trying to protect and rehabilitate. And in that sense, Mashreq and we are thrilled to partner with Emirates Nature WWF on Notice Nature towards making sure that everyone can contribute and that we are playing a role, we are playing a part to rehabilitate and protect nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, what is this Notice Nature thing that we're trying to do? What are we trying to do? We're going to invite you. Everybody can do it. Doesn't matter how old you are, what your job is, where you are in the world even. Everybody can help us collect information about nature. And when we collect information about nature, we have a better understanding of how healthy it is, where species are moving. Are there changes as a result of climate change? Are we seeing species for the first time in an area we haven't seen them before? So we need information about the different species to know if they need help. So we're in the business of protecting nature, of conservation, but if I don't know if something needs conservation or not, I can't do it, right? So we need information. Information about what biodiversity there is helps us to protect it. So we need to reverse this loss of nature. As we've all determined, we are nature, we need nature, so we need to take care of it. What we're trying to do is get some research-grade observations into a database, and you can absolutely help us with that. I'm going to give you a training in a minute. It's going to get serious. You're going to have to do some learning. So we're trying to get 5,000 new research-grade observations, and this will help us have the information that we need to protect areas of high biodiversity. We'll work out where most of the stuff is living, and then we can advocate to protect those areas. So we're trying to make sure that 30% of the land and 30% of the sea is protected by 2030. So, how are you going to do that? There's an app. There's an app for everything, right? Now there's an app to map biodiversity. There's an app called iNaturalist, and I would love for you to get your phones out again. There's a free Wi-Fi, plug-and-play free Wi-Fi, and go on to whichever app store you have. I didn't put the QR code up this time because I know there's all sorts of different app stores. And search for this word, iNaturalist. So iNaturalist is a very powerful tool that uses the the incredible machine in your pocket that has GPS, it has time and date, it has a really high definition camera, and it can help us map the biodiversity. So you need to get this app. And then once you've got the app, I'll give you a second to do that. I'm monitoring who's downloading the app. Oscar definitely already has it. Drew's probably got some of the highest number of observations in the UAE. All right, so hands up when you've finished downloading the app or if you've already got it. Well done. Very good. Can you guess I used to be a teacher? Okay, so everyone's got iNaturalist now. So what you need to do is go and find our project. It's called Notice Nature UAE. And let me show you how to do that. So in the app, there should be a little, can you see? There should be a little icon that says projects. So you need to go to click that. Oh, if you can go back. Oh, yeah, okay, click projects. And then you need to type in and search Notice Nature UAE and find that project and join it. Once you've joined that project, I can see all of your observations, and I can go in and I can help you identify the things you've seen, and we can keep track of how much is being recorded. So Notice Nature UAE, and then these are all the species that we've already found within the project that we've been trialing already. So we've already got 506 species that we've mapped as a community. Yay! And 2,314 observations. So we've got some already there, and with your help, we're going to get more and more. Okay, how are we doing? Has everyone joined the project? Debs is shaking her head. Okay. What are you stuck on? Good job. Amazing. So once you've joined the project, everything will automatically go in there. You don't have to tag it to the project every time. Do we need to go back? Are you stuck on the... You're good? Okay, so once you've joined the project, then you can start to explore. So if you're going to a new area, and you want to find out what kind of wildlife is in this area. What have people been seeing in this area? You can go to the Explore section and just zoom in on your map and press Search the Area. And then you see all of these pins. Those are species that have been identified here at Expo already. And we're gonna do some more later. So, are you ready to learn how to upload your own observations? Yeah? So you find that picture of Observe, and you'll see a screen like this. So maybe you've already taken a picture and you just want to upload something from your photo roll, or you can do it live, the camera in the app at the same time. So you can choose which one you want to do. You can even record sounds. If you hear an interesting bird sound, you can record the sounds. So you click, I normally do photo library because then I can take loads of pictures and I can zoom in, I can edit them to make it more clear. But then I upload on site. So then you click the photo library, you choose your image, and it should do something. Ooh. Great. Then you find your wildlife. So this is the Arabian dwarf red honeybee. Arabian red dwarf honeybee. You got that? The Arabian red dwarf honeybee. It's the local bee species. It does make honey, but it's not normally used by the beekeepers because they like to be in open spaces. They don't like to be confined indoors. A bit like me, really. I need to be outside as much as possible. But they make honey, and the wild captured honey is very, very highly prized. Lovin has a question. Why is it the red dwarf honeybee? So they're about half the size of the normal honeybee, of the commercial honeybees, and they've got this little red bottom. And you see those white bits on its leg. That's the pollen that it's collected, and it's storing it in its pollen pockets. So I've seen tons of these today, and I'm going to challenge you guys to try and find one later on today. So this was a bee that I took a picture of. So Then I've uploaded it into my observation. Now, one of the coolest things about iNaturalist is that all of these observations that are going into this database. You have images that are tagged to the species name. Now, all of that data, all of those images that are tagged to species names, we live in the amazing age of AI and machine learning. The machines can reverse that process. So once you upload something, iNaturalist can guess what you've seen. It's like Shazam for nature. So, but we need as many accurate images with their species as possible for the machine to learn, right? And one of the things that's happening here in the UAE is that our species are quite specific to this area, and there's not quite enough data in the system for that image recognition to be really strong. So we need more and more observations so that that system is as strong as possible. So as you see, I uploaded it and I asked it, what did you see? And it got to honeybee, but it didn't know which species of honeybee. So I used a field guide that we've prepared that you'll be able to use today when we go on our field trip. But it doesn't matter if you don't get it quite right, because one of the other amazing things about iNaturalist is that the community come in and they verify if your ID is correct or not. And even us as a team at Emirates Nature WWF, and especially Drew's very good at this, actually. Thanks, Drew, for all those identifications you've done on my stuff. Drew will go in and he'll fix your ID if you've got it wrong, or he'll change it. So unless you've had someone else verify the species, it's not considered a research grade observation. So we know which ones are accurate and which ones aren't. So we know that this was the red dwarf honeybee. So I just typed the name. It is generally better, if you know it, to use the scientific name. So we've got two names there, right? The red dwarf honeybee and Apis florea. Why do we have this difficult to pronounce scientific name? Anyone know?
Name of the person who discovered them? One part of it.
Sometimes, not always, actually. Although, fun fact, Dr. Drew, who's coming on the stage later, has 3 species named after him. We have a scientific name. Anyone else want to guess why we have a scientific name? Latin. It's in Latin, it's sometimes in Greek. But why do we need these annoying, difficult to pronounce names? To unify it, yeah. So I'm sure there's a different name for the species in the local dialect. There's probably a different name for the species in whatever languages you guys speak. I'm British and terribly bad at languages, so I only know English. But even in English, sometimes we call them different things, right? So there's different names for the same thing. So it is better to try and use a scientific name if you can, and you'll find the species more easily. So you tag the species. Then we need to know when you saw it, because if you saw a bee at nighttime, that's weird. Maybe there's something going on with the pesticides that are confusing their sense of night and day. That's a thing, by the way. Neonicotinoids cause the bees to get confused about what's night and what's day, and then they get lost. So we don't want the bees to be out at nighttime. So we want to know the time and the date. Also, interestingly, are we seeing bees in the summer when it's really, really hot? Or are we seeing them only in the winter? This sort of information is very useful for scientists to be able to protect them. So you put in the time and date. If you're doing this live, it's super easy because it will just automatically give you the exact time and date that you're in right now. But you can go and use historical sightings as well. Or if you've got a really good camera with a big lens, sometimes we do that, the uploads a bit later. So you've got to put in the time and date. And then you've got to do the location. So again, these brilliant smartphones that we all have very accurate GPS. So you can easily just click this little green arrow in the corner, and that will just navigate to where you are. And boom, there you go. You've got your location. It's so easy. I believe in all of you. So once you've done that, you've then got your species uploaded and you're a scientist. Do you reckon you can do it? Yes, I think you can. I think you can. So here we go. Here was the bee that I saw at Expo just yesterday. And then you're on the map. Your observation is contributing to global biodiversity studies. There might be someone based in like California who's studying bees who's just interested to know about UAE bees, and your sighting could be something that they're using in their research. There's thousands of research papers that have been published as a result of this data. So it's super, super cool. So we've mapped this biodiversity. Hooray! But we want to increase the biodiversity as well. We don't just want to look at it. I mean, we do want to look at it, but we want to increase it. We want to have more and more. So I'm going to invite onto the stage my colleague, Dr. Andrew Gardner, and we're going to have a little chat about how we can increase biodiversity in our gardens, in our wild areas around us. So Drew, please do come up on the stage. We can have a sit down. Great. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks. It's a great event.
Oh, good. So, Drew, we're all dying to know. We've been busy out there recording all our species that we see, maybe in our gardens, maybe in the parks, maybe out when we're hiking, that kind of thing. What can anyone that's sitting here today do to increase biodiversity in the areas that they live in or they visit?
Well, most of us, of course, live in the cities. Most of us live in flats or maybe a villa with a bit of garden. And wherever you live, there are things that you can do to really increase biodiversity. First, I'd just like to say how important biodiversity is, even in the urban environment, in the cities. You know, as Arabella says, we are all part of nature. We are basically animals that have evolved in nature over millions of years, and it's really hardwired into our brains that we are part of nature. We need nature psychologically. And I'm sure most of you will have felt that when you go out into a beautiful natural environment, stress just kind of drifts away and you really feel relaxed and at one with your environment. And this is something that even in the city is really important. Now, when you open your window in the morning and there's a bulbul or a sunbird singing outside somewhere, or just the doves cooing, that also helps. It helps psychologically. We all need this. And we all should really try our best to get out into nature. It doesn't matter if you don't know what the species are or anything. Just get out and experience nature is really, really important. So what about nature in the cities and what can we do? It really is, I mean, even looking around here, you can see greenery pretty much everywhere. And our city planners, you know, do understand this to a certain extent anyway, and are planting trees and so on. But there's some areas, of course, in the city which particularly maybe in more high-dense housing areas or industrial areas, which have very little greenery. And one thing that is has been shown is that those areas are what are called heat islands. They actually heat up. The concrete, the tarmac, absorbs the heat from the sun and keeps it and then radiates it out. So that those areas can be, particularly on a still night, for example, can be 3 or 4 degrees hotter than in kind of greener areas. Really showing the importance of having greenery in the city. A city like Al Ain, for example, which has been really well planted and is actually much greener than the surrounding desert, of course, actually is cooler than its environmental areas. So if you live in the city and you have garden space, it's really important to plant it up as much as possible. Now, of course, water is precious. So planting with water, with water-friendly plants, if you like, which don't need much water, is important as well. And that often comes to be our natural plants, the plants which are adapted here to living in nature. So if you have a garden, I would recommend that you rewild the garden a little bit. Don't spend too much time picking up the dead leaves, for example, because those dead leaves which fall on the ground are habitats for biodiversity. Insects, spiders, even lizards can live in those habitats. And you know, you've made a little nature reserve, in a sense, in your garden. Plant things like the gaff tree, if you have space for it in your garden. The gaff tree is a fantastic tree. It's the UAE's national tree. It doesn't require much water. It is attractive for bees. It's a beautiful tree as well. It has flowers at a certain time of year. Or the Arabian moringa tree, which is a native tree from our mountains here. It doesn't just need to grow in the mountains, though. It grows very, very well in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and our cities, and doesn't need much water. It produces beautiful flowers in the springtime, which the bees love. And it's a very attractive tree as well. It's kind of a feathery tree. It doesn't grow too big, you know. So plant things like that. You can also, at some of our nurseries, actually get other native plants, such as some of the ground cover plants and some of the native grasses. And by planting these, you're actually attracting nature, providing a home for nature. Now, what if you don't have a garden, which actually is probably most of us? What can you do then? Well, if you have a balcony, you can use that as a little garden. And I would certainly recommend using that to actually grow some food, maybe, particularly herbs, which are really easy to grow. Things like basil and thyme, and maybe even rosemary, or maybe even tomatoes. And if you grow something like basil, it grows well. You can harvest it for its leaves and use it for cooking, obviously. But once it's grown a little bit more, it'll start flowering, and some people will then throw it out and grow a new one. But don't do that. Leave it to flower. The flowers are beautiful, and the bees love them. So, again, you're making a little nature reserve, and something that actually is good for your soul, if you like, by being able to see the bees or the butterflies coming to these flowers. So do that. In many parts of the world, in the urban environment, there are community gardens. And I think this is something which I would hope would be the future in places like Dubai and Abu Dhabi, where there is urban space which people living in the area can use to maybe grow vegetables or to grow flowers or whatever, or plant trees. And again, this is something that's really valuable. Of course, here it's a little bit more difficult than some places because you need to water them quite a lot. But you know, it's well worth doing. It really is. And the other thing, of course, is to actually get out into nature. Get out into the desert. Get out into the mountains. Go hiking. Go and have picnics. And experience nature. Look at the animals and plants. And while you're doing so, whip out your phones and do some iNaturalist data collection for us. As Arabella says, this is actually really, really important. You don't need to know what the organism is. You see a butterfly, you don't need to know the name of it. You can take a photo, put it on iNaturalist. The AI may identify it. It may actually get it wrong sometimes, or it may not. But then we look at these things and we try, if we can identify them, we will. And once it's identified, it becomes a research-grade data point. That's a bit of data where we know the species was there in this exact locality at this time of day and on this particular day of the year. And that is a lot of information, and it's really important information. Worldwide, I don't know what the total of records is on iNaturalist now. iNaturalist has been going for about 15 years or something, I think. But it is hundreds of millions of data points. And as Arabella says, these are used by scientists in publications. That's used by governments for looking at distributions of plants. And in many cases, even new species have been discovered by citizen scientists taking a photo of something. They don't know what it is, but it's, you know, it's something nice. Take a photo, put it on there, and somebody's come along and said, well, you know, I don't know what that is. And they've looked at it, and it's, you know, it could be a completely new species for science even. So do this, particularly, you know, around your house, your flat, your environment, and particularly when you go out in the desert or you go out into the mountains and you see something. Just spend a few minutes doing this. You know, if you collect just a few observations, take insects, Birds are a little bit more difficult with a phone camera because it's a bit difficult to get close to them. But if you have another camera with a zoom lens, take it. Or even if you are using your phone camera, very often, by the time you zoom in, there's actually a good enough image to identify that species. When you are doing it, take a little bit of time to try to get the best photo that you can. And I think as part of our Leaders of Change, we need to actually run some workshops on nature photography, in particular phone nature photography, because the phone is actually a really, really good camera. And just with a little bit of care and a little bit of knowledge, you can get fantastic images. You know, even by doing this, I'm sure some of you will then actually get hooked on the photography thing, and share them on social media, you know, spread the love of nature. Really important. Okay, I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Drew. There you go. Drew has prescribed you picnics. You have to go out into nature and have a picnic. I was Googling what we can do to increase urban biodiversity, and I found this image behind me. This is a bug hotel. Could you talk to us a bit about that, and is that something we should be doing here in Dubai as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Bug hotels are designed for certain kinds of insects which like to live in or make their nest and live in these confined spaces. So it's usually a series of bamboos or even a block of wood with holes drilled in it, where particularly things like solitary bees can nest and live their lives there. So it's encouraging certain insects which like this kind of habitat. And bee hotels are something you can make yourself, or you can get your kids to make as a school project, easy to do. In many parts of the world, other things that people are doing are putting up bird nesting boxes or even bat nesting boxes. In Australia, where I've been living, people put up possum boxes and things. So because in our environment, particularly in the kind of urban environment, things like trees which have hollows for animals, maybe birds or mammals or whatever, to nest in, are increasingly rare. By the time a tree develops holes into it, often people come along and say, oh, that tree's getting dangerous. It might fall over and, and land on someone's car or something, and it gets removed, which removes a particular habitat, which is really important. But by putting up bird boxes, so birds which nest in holes, normally nest in holes in trees, they have a place where they can live. So same is true for bats, same is true for some of the small mammals, and even some of the insects. And in fact, many times people put bird boxes up, you suddenly find that the bees come along and think, oh, that's a good place to have a little beehive, and they'll invade it as well. But never mind. And that's something I will just say, and if you do have a garden, and these little dwarf red honeybees come along and build a nest in your tree, don't call the municipality to remove it or anything. They're actually really nice to have in your garden. These bees, they'll sting if you try and grab one, but their stings, they're very small bees. Their stings are much weaker than in the commercial kind of honeybees. They generally can't sting through clothing, for example, and they're not aggressive anyway, and they're really interesting to watch.
Thank you so much. So we've got a few minutes now for any questions for Dr. Drew. Does anyone have any specific questions they would like to ask? Lovin's had 2 questions already today, so I'm going to go with Ahmed Abu Samra. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Good. I just want to ask something that, we always kind of talk about the importance of having insects and how they're really important for biodiversity as a whole. But then there's also the other kind of point of aspect when, people generally don't really react well to insects. They really want to get rid of it, and it's disgusting. So how do you kind of bridge that barrier and kind of educating people? And at the same time, how do you make it actually, enjoyable or something to kind of observe or people to appreciate? So what we recommend about that? Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, many people don't like insects, and in a sense, sometimes this may be cultural or just people think bugs. They think of mosquitoes. They think of flies. They think of wasps, and these kind of things. And it's true. They are a nuisance. You don't like flies buzzing around you and not getting onto your food and things. So not all insects, I guess, are super attractive and interesting. But biodiversity, benefits everyone. And even these kind of animals have their place in the great scheme of things. Bees, just to go back to bees, for example, I mean, a lot of people don't like bees because they're scared of them and they think they're going to sting them and so on. But bees are absolutely critically important in our environment in that they pollinate plants, both the natural plants that we see outside in the mountains and deserts, and also our crop plants and our trees and so on, the mangroves even. Without bees, the mangroves don't produce viable seeds, and after one generation, they're gone, basically. We have to have the bees to pollinate. And if we think about it, all food chains in our environment begin with plants. And the plants support the animal life. But without those plants, there is nothing. There is no life. And those plants are all dependent on bees and many other kinds of insects to pollinate them. So in agriculture, for example, by spreading insecticides around, even in our gardens, killing all of these animals, we're actually really doing ourselves and nature a disservice. We need some of those animals. Other animals, one particular one here, for example, and one which is very dear to my heart, are the geckos. And geckos are the little lizards that we sometimes see in our houses climbing up the walls. Those are just a few species, but in the UAE we actually have about 22 species of geckos, many of them living in the mountains and in the deserts. Geckos, many people don't like them. They don't like them on their walls, and they will try and kill them or whatever. But those geckos actually are really helpful. They're eating mosquitoes, and so they're a little kind of a natural insecticide around your house, eating mosquitoes and flies. So really look after them and enjoy them. They're actually quite cute.
I'm going to cheerlead you for a second there, Drew. Drew has his own gecko, the gardener's leaf-toed gecko. So if you're out in the mountains, you might spot Drew's gecko. He's one of the world's leading experts on geckos, so dear to his heart was an understatement. We've maybe got time for one more question? Sure, go ahead. Where's the mic gone?
Doctor, hello?
Hi.
Yeah. Doctor, I am very curious to know, we all have heard of Miyawaki forests. Do you see there is a possibility of growing such forest in this part of the world? And second question is, how do you think they can be scaled up in, say, every city, in every region of the world? Because they are very good. They just become independent and they grow on their own without any extra work. They become self-sustaining and they grow very fast.
Yeah, a really nice question. I suspect most of us haven't heard of Miyawaki forest, actually. But let me explain a little bit about what that is. Miyawaki forest is named after a Japanese botanist who devised, about 40 years ago, a way of planting forests, often in urban areas, which grow really quickly. And the way that he recommended to plant these is to firstly use the native trees from that environment, because they're the ones which are, if you like, adapted to that environment and to those particular environmental conditions. And he recommends planting trees densely, so not just one here and one there and so on, planting a dense kind of arrangement, and not just the trees, but also the shrubs which would maybe grow under the trees. And of course, to start with, these have to be looked after until they get established. But once they get established, they tend to grow really quickly and form a dense forest, if you like, or not just a forest, but a dense ecosystem with the trees and the other plants which are there. Another kind of thing you can do is actually encourage the soil to have the right kinds of fungi, for example, which also encourage the growth of the trees. Now, here in the UAE, it's a little bit more difficult because, firstly, it's very hot, it's a desert environment, and it's more difficult to establish trees. But if you look around in our environment, you will see native trees, like gaff trees, for example, or the samar, which is the umbrella thorn, growing outside, and nobody's watering them. You know, they're surviving on their own. And these trees can do that. If you look around Dubai, you'll see the broom bush, which is another, not really a tree, but quite a dense bush, growing in many places. No one's watering them. They grow on their own. And so it is certainly possible to establish, using these kind of techniques, establish a forest. And I think this is something that we at Emirates Nature actually, you know, have at the back of our minds as a future project that we would like to, you know, maybe get involved with. Because, as I said, you know, these kind of green spaces, natural spaces in city environments are really important as a cooling thing, for one thing, to break up the kind of heat islands, but also for biodiversity and also as a natural place where people can enjoy. So it is more difficult here, but I'm sure it is possible. There are ways of establishing trees here which do not require irrigation lines. One of these ways is actually using something called a water cocoon, which is it's a plastic reservoir which you bury in the soil. You put in maybe 20 liters of water, and you plant your tree inside in a hole within this reservoir. And the reservoir's got a little wick which puts a small amount of water into the ground for the roots of the tree. It's not enough water so the tree just relies on it. In order for it to grow, it has to grow deeper and put its roots deeper down to try to find the groundwater. So that you only need to have, and it also collects rainwater or anything like that as well with a specially designed lid. So as long as there's a little bit of rain or dew or fog moisture, you probably may only need to fill it up once to start with. And if there's a long period of drought, maybe after 3 months, you might need to put a bit more water into it. But it doesn't need regular irrigation. And the tree is not relying on groundwater irrigation on the surface. It's actually putting its roots down. So that after maybe a couple of years, you should be able to take the water cocoon away, and the tree should be able to live on its own. So there are ways. So it's, yeah, a nice question. Thank you.
And just an extra point for that one, some people might have had an allergic reaction to the word plastic. They can be used up to 10 times, so it is reusable plastic.
It is, yeah.
All right, we have maybe one more question. I can see some little ones down there who have a question. Do you want to go ahead? Yeah?
What type of new species of animals did you discover that's new to science?
Good question.
Ooh, that's new to science. Well, you know, as I said, I like geckos. So I have found species of geckos which are new to science. In fact, I think at least 4 of them in this part of the world, which are completely new to science. It's quite difficult to find new species now. But one of those, I'll tell you the story of how I found it. I was camping in the mountains of Oman, and it was I think it was a kind of springtime. It was a really nice temperature, so I went out with a friend to look for geckos and see what was living in the environment, and found these little geckos and said, well, I don't recognize those. I've never seen that species before. And so I actually collected a couple of them and took them back to the lab and looked up all the books and stuff and couldn't find them. So I thought, well, that's really strange. You know, possibly it's a species which is found maybe in Iran or something. That's also in these mountains. So I looked there, but couldn't find it. So I sent the geckos to the Natural History Museum in London to an expert there who really knows even more than I do about geckos to see if he recognized them. And he said, no, these are completely new. This is a new species to science. And so once you've done that, what has to actually happen is you have to write a very detailed description. When I discovered that one, this was before we used DNA as well. Nowadays, if someone finds a new species, they have to describe exactly what it looks like and how many scales there are and how many, what the size is and how long its legs are and all of that kind of stuff. But also analyze its DNA as well, so you can find out what other species it's related to and things. So it's quite a process. But having said that, things like the insects, even here in the UAE, are not very well known at all. And I think projects which are actually catching insects or even photographing insects with iNaturalist stand a much higher chance of actually finding new species. There was a project here which ran, I think, must have been about 10 years ago now, where traps to catch insects were put out all around the Emirates for a few years, and the man who was doing this and sent off these specimens that he was collected to experts on ants, an expert on dragonflies, an expert on certain kind of moths and so on, in museums all around the world. And I can't remember exactly how many new species this project found, but it was well into the hundreds of completely new species to science. So there are lots of new species out there.
Yeah, especially insects. And one of my favorite stories I heard about someone who found a type of fly in Australia that had evolved without wings, so it couldn't fly, so it was called a walk. True story. All right, so I could listen to Drew talk all day, but we are unfortunately out of time. So let's have a huge round of applause for Dr. Drew Gardner. Yes, thank you so much, Drew. Okay, I'm out of time, but I promised you a field trip. So what we're going to do, I've got some fantastic volunteers. They're wearing shirts like this or black shirts with the little Emirates Nature WWF badge. They're going to head out just in front of the sign here, the Extreme Hangout sign, and we're going to go in groups. I'm going to go to, hopefully Drew can join us. Yes, in a minute. I'm not quite finished. So we're going to go and we're going to take part in this mission to notice nature. Are you ready? Yay! Okay, so I want you to go and have a look, go for a walk, try and find some urban wildlife. See how many different types of creatures you can find. We'll give you sort of half an hour. You can stay doing it for as long as you like. Take some photos of those wild things that you find and make a note of the location, date, and time. So there's a really important word here, which is wild, and very quickly we're going to play a game of wild or not wild, okay? You guys ready with the slides? Because we're going to go through fast on this one. Okay, so first, wildlife only. Wild or not wild? Next. Wild or not wild? Not wild. Next. Wild or not wild? Next. Wild or not wild? Next. Wild or not wild? Depends. It could be someone's own goat, or it could be a feral goat, which is a goat that's escaped and is living wild. So it could be. That was a trick one. Wild or not wild? Not wild. The trick is, you see in the corner there, you can see the irrigation pipes. So we don't want to be taking too many pictures of things that are not wild, yeah? Okay, next. Wild or not wild? So I guess the tree is wild, the dog is not wild. Next. Wild or not wild? Wild. Next. Wild or not wild? Wild. Next. Wild or not wild? Wild. Next. Oh, there we go. Okay. That was the end. So you're trained. Huh? What if he's in a park? This was in the mangroves, actually, so this one is definitely wild. Okay, so that's it. We are going to join some of our Leaders of Change volunteers. They're all holding these little field guides, so you can spot them. And if you can't stay for the field trip, that's okay, but you must join our Leaders of Change program. You can follow this QR code here to find the website. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry to Extreme Hangout for running over time. We're going to just do a quick group photo with all the speakers. Where's Kartik gone? There he is. Yeah. No, no, yeah. You can, if you've got the scientific name, you can add that in and just, it will say call it this, and you can go with that. Yeah. Where's Layla gone? Is she? She's coming back. Okay. Okay, so maybe you can, we're just going to have a group. If you guys want to be here for the group photo, you're welcome to stay. Otherwise, you can go and find the volunteers. And these are the guys. They're holding the field guides. They will lead you for the field trip, and I'll come and find you. Do we want to go back to the first slide, actually, with all the speakers' names on it for the group picture? Yeah, or I think the next one, yeah. Yeah. She gone?
I think Lela's gone. Yeah, she walked away. You can do that. That's it.
I think she's had to head off to another event, actually. So, yeah, great. Into the sun? In the shade.
Hello. Thank you so much for being here today. It is my great honor to be able to introduce our next storyteller of the day. Her name is Victoria Whalen. She is from Georgia, USA, but has strong family ties in Saratoga Springs, New York. She studied biology, urban and environmental sustainability, and she explores the intersection of race and air pollution and COVID-10 vaccine distribution. She has advocated for environmental justice with organizations such as Our Climate and New York Renews. She has worked with endangered species protection and land use policies and climate litigation. Let's please give Victoria a quick applause and thank her so much for being able to join us today.
Good. Awesome. Thank you for that amazing introduction. Once again, my name is Victoria Whalen. As she said, I come from the United States, from the down south in Georgia, but my family does have ties in upstate New York, and I am currently on Kalapuya land in Oregon in my final year of law school at the University of Oregon, and I'm just so happy and honored to be here and to everyone's presence here in Dubai and also for the online viewers. And so I just want to start by kind of giving you guys a deep dive into my life, my experiences, and kind of what got me here today and into my activism. I have asthma. I come from a low-income family. And growing up down south, it's kind of always been difficult to talk about climate. Even though you're surrounded by nature, I also grew up in North Carolina in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Even though you're surrounded, people don't necessarily make a connection of what we're doing, that things that we're doing affects the planet. So I've always kind of been, you know, what they call a tree hugger, an environmentalist. The kids at school would always be like, why do you care so much? Why are you part of the reduce, reuse, recycle programming? And it's because we have to. It's so beautiful. Green's my favorite color. It's so peaceful. It's so calm. And it's the air that we breathe, the land that we are on, and the feet, and what kind of grounds us into kind of everything that we do today. Our cells are connected to everything that we touch. Since I'm standing on this stage, I'm now a part of this stage, and this stage is a part of this ground, and this ground is a part of the core, and the core is a part of the sky, because everything is working together. And so that's kind of how I feel about my activism and my journey. I went to school in New York City at a school called Marymount Manhattan College. I studied biology and urban environmental sustainability. And the reason why I added that second major was because my first year that I moved to New York City, I lived in Midtown Manhattan, which is a lot of pollution. It's very busy, very industrial. I mean, the New York City complex is real. And for the first time in about 7, 8 years, I had a massive, massive asthma attack. And it was so foreign to me that I really didn't understand what was happening. I thought, you know, maybe it's just like shortness of breath, this, that, and the other. But actually, the longer I sat there, the more I realized my lungs were constricting and I just couldn't breathe. And it wasn't until later and towards the end of my undergrad career that I realized I had that asthma attack because of where I moved to, because of the pollution that I now was exposed to. And I said, if that can happen to me, a transplant from Georgia who came all the way here just to go to school here for 3, 4 years, what's happening to the people that have lived there their entire lives, to the other Black, brown little boys and girls in the low-income communities all around the city? And so I did my final senior thesis. It was a quantitative analysis of asthma, air pollution, and the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, because I really wanted them to have proof, to have some evidence that there is a systemic issue when it does come to the environment and the injustices that happen. It's not happening equally. It's happening all over the world. Air pollution happens all over the world, water contamination. But if you really look at the stats, it's happening to the low income, to the Black, brown communities, to the disabled, to the LGBTQ plus IA, and any other minorities that you can think of. And it's purposeful. And sure enough, my research, my 30 pages, found the correlations between race, asthma, and where they were living. They were living closer to the factories, closer to the traffic stops, closer to these waste treatment facilities, and it all kind of just correlates together. And another interesting side note is now, like I said, I'm on Kayapua land in Oregon, all the way across the United States in the Pacific Northwest, pretty much the farthest you can get from Georgia. I took a road trip all the way over there without ever seeing my apartment, without ever knowing where I was gonna stay. I just needed to get there. Time was running out. I just needed to have a home. I found it on Craigslist online. There wasn't any pictures, but it was cheap. It had a 1-bedroom. I was like, this is perfect. Okay, we're gonna get it. I arrived. I took my first law school class, and it was a land use class. And my professor told me that the area that I'm currently living in is Eugene, which is the city that I'm in, only sacrifice zone, only environmental injustice sacrifice zone, where we get 99% of the city's pollution. 99%. And this is a big city. It's a big university college town. And somehow me, a transplant, an asthmatic, low-income black girl from Georgia, somehow still ended up in these sacrifice zones without really any other external pressure. That doesn't seem right to me. And so noticing these patterns over and over again, I've just made it my mission, and really the kind of crux of who I am, is to really advocate for these people that are experiencing the same experiences as me. I want to be that beacon, that megaphone, the database of knowledge and of information to really help people explain what is going on to them in their communities, as well as educate and uplift and make sure that these voices are being heard, because my story is not unique. It's not the only one. It's happening everywhere to so many other people. But it's my duty, because I have this platform, I have this ability to be in spaces like this, to be talking to you all, to really use that and to advocate. And that's where storytelling and art and activism really come in. I didn't disclose this, but I do have a musical theater background. Acting is my one and true pleasure. I've been doing it since about the age of 7. I've competed in competitions, I've won awards and accolades. I want to create movies. I love TV and film. I also love poetry. I'm a poet. I love to write. I've written short stories. And the common thread among all my work that I've done is climate change, is health effects, it's disparities, because those are the stories that really matter. And just to put it in perspective, I want to read you a poem that I wrote that kind of encapsulates the thoughts that I've been feeling leading up to COP. And it's called "The Worlds Will Lose." Lately, at night I sit and wonder about the worlds we've lost. Communities, ecologies, histories, is it ever worth the cost? I ponder the existences that now cease to be. Was it slow? Was it fast? Was it agonizing? I can't help but wonder about the worlds we've lost. Clusters of youth enjoying the humid summer breeze, children running rampant barefoot in the streets. City living never smelled so sweet, but instead of the scent of the flower of God, carcinogens. Carnations have turned to carcinogens, chemicals cascading through adolescence, clawing at their throats and lungs, constricting like a boa, but instead of a python, it's a byproduct of corporate greed, always outweighing community needs, never giving back. And I can't help but wonder, why were they all black? Lately, in the morning, I smile and I remember we've solved the worst. Spring is no longer silent, sulfur no longer showering down, sites of villainous hazardous waste saved by superfunds like a real-life Marvel show, slowing the degradation of species so few, sustaining a commitment to developing new views. But then the skies once again darken their hues, and I sit and wonder about the worlds we'll lose. the children still choking, the communities still crying, the climate still clashing, the earth, our planet, our mother still dying. The power of storytelling, the power of poetry, the power of art is to evoke emotions, is to create connections, to bring back memories. Without it, change is not possible. It's what makes lawmakers understand the realities that are happening now, the realities that are happening in the future. It's what makes change happen. I'm very US-centric, so I'm going to bring up one of my favorite examples, Rachel Carson's A Silent Spring. Because of that book, because of her sitting down, listening to her community members every day, sitting on this porch, on this swing, noticing the birds no longer sang, the grasshoppers no longer chirped, the rivers were running dry, there was no more fish in the streams. And it wasn't just her. She went around to her community members and she asked those same stories. She said, "Do you notice there's no more music in the air? It's stagnant, it's still." And because of that, she wrote a book. She wrote a book that reached so many people in 1962. She was a biologist, not even an author. I'm a biologist. I have my degree in biology. I'm about to be a law JD student, have my law degree. And I still write. I write short stories. I write short fiction because that's the power of words. That's the power of taking the abstract and putting it into something that people can relate to. And everyone has that story. No matter how big or small you are, no matter if you think that it's insignificant, it isn't. We are here at COP, at these global spaces, to advocate for not only ourselves, but for our communities back home. And for me, being in these spaces, it's really clear that it's lacking my perspectives, my community stories. And that's not right. It's not okay. It's not okay how inaccessible it is to get here, to be here, to have people sit down and listen to you. And I thank all of you for being here in this room right now and just taking in these words. But I want you to think about that when you go home to somebody else. When you go home and there's a little kid on the street or your little cousin and they might be asking you 1,000,001 questions. They might be bothering you, bugging you with the why. Answer them. They want to know. And it's because they have a unique experience. They have a unique viewpoint that you might never have thought about in 1,000,000 years. But because they use their voice, they use their words, or maybe they even drew you a picture. Because at the end of the day, storytelling isn't just what we say or what we read. It's what we draw. It's what we hear. It's the music that plays. It's the artwork. There's so much beautiful art in this space. There's a reason why we have so many wonderful art museums and people pay hundreds of dollars just to stand in line to look at the Mona Lisa, and they wait for hours and hours because it's evoking something. It's bringing something to their brains, to their forefront. And imagine we could do that with climate change. Imagine we can do that with environmental injustices. Imagine we can do that, but centered on Black, brown, Indigenous voices, the ones who have already been telling the stories in our own communities. And imagine your community expanding. And it's not just the people who look like you or the people that are in your same state, in the same country, but it's also the people online. It's the people you might reach if you make a quick TikTok video. It's the people you might reach when you are live streaming an event that you're at. I'm honored to be here today in this space. I am the media fellow for Black Girl Environmentalist. I also do social media work for Action for the Climate Emergency. And I've somehow found myself in this position, not kind of accidentally. As you can tell, I do have that performing background, but I never imagined that I would be able to use my skills and create content that is accessible, that is reachable. And anybody can do that. Anyone. Anyone has a phone, can just sit there, put it up, make a 60-second video on their climate story. Right now, I could make one of how the sun is so hot that I probably look a mess on this stage right now because I'm like sweating buckets. And it shouldn't be this hot. At least for me, I know when I go back to Georgia, it will probably be this hot, and we are in Christmas. It's Christmas time. And when I go home, I expect the weather to be just like this. And that in and of itself is a climate story, because that shouldn't be happening. It really is just having the courage to just take the time to just go up to one person and be like, do you have a second? Just 1 minute. 60 seconds, it's so easy. A quick little blurb, a quick little spiel, who you are, what this moment is, and what it means to you. And something else that's interesting as we're in these spaces, it always also focuses on the doom and gloom. We only focus on stories that are sad, that are depressing, that have trauma. We see in the news all of the stories about the floods, about the fires, about the earthquakes. But we never see the stories about the solutions, about the hopes, about the dreams. And that's also the power of storytelling. It's switching that narrative that we are not at the end of the world. It's just beginning. This planet is still new. We are new. Change is inevitable, even though it might seem slow, it might seem draining, it might seem taxing, and like I said, it might seem like nobody's listening. But I guarantee you that someone is. I guarantee you that you are not alone in this fight. And I can guarantee you that no matter what you say, it has a purpose, here, now, and forever. My final takeaway, and this is kind of geared towards the older generation, I will admit. I am only 24. I consider myself a youth. Please, 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 have a bit more humility, have a bit more patience and kindness and respect towards the younger generation. We understand you have been here longer. We understand your histories and your stories, and we want to learn and we want to take and absorb. But we want to share with you our experiences because they are still alike. We want to share with you our solutions because at the end of the day, we're still in this climate crisis, so clearly some solutions that y'all have proposed have not worked yet. Maybe take a listen to us. We might have some new ideas, some new things to say, some new perspectives. It's not that hard. I think it might be one of the easiest things that we can do as a community, as we're in these spaces. And it really fills me with so much hope and happiness and positivity, knowing that this isn't the end, knowing that my story doesn't end right now, that once I step off this stage, that was it. Y'all are never gonna see me again. Some words will resonate with you. They'll stick with you. That's what happens. That's how human language and our information, our knowledge is stored. The brain consumes everything. The brain never forgets. And so one day I hope when you're randomly in the United States, when you're randomly in Georgia, you think about that one time, how you were in Dubai and this random Black girl from Georgia was on stage talking about storytelling, rambling on about her life. She did a random poem at some point, like, what was that? I hope you remember it in these moments. And I hope after this session and after these crazy 2 weeks of COP, which I have been a part of in the Blue Zone, dealing with all the negotiations, I really hope that you bring your stories back to your homes, back to your communities. And the first thing that you do when you get off the plane or when you go back to your hotel room is to really tell someone how you're feeling, what you're experiencing, and how you think you can make a difference. And always, 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 and on a positive, and on your hopes, your dreams. Because at the end of the day, that's what keeps the movement going. That's what makes change happen. That's what puts the power back in our hands. Thank you.
Hello. Welcome back to our fourth and final panel session of the day. Today we'll be discussing the evolution of climate justice. This is a panel curated by Island Innovation and moderated by Stacey. So if you could join me in giving them a massive round of applause as we start this panel.
Oh.
Where do you, next to you. Thanks.
Well, hello everyone. It's great to be here. As you can see from the photo, I'm Stacey Alvarez. I am the Partnerships Manager with Island Innovation. I'm also the lead facilitator of one of our most incredible initiatives, the Caribbean Climate Justice Leaders Academy. And here on the stage, we have 4 amazing young people who are going to be talking about climate justice. I'll be introducing them first and just let them say a bit about themselves and their journey in the climate justice space. So we're going to start with Ms. Carice Elliott of St. Kitts Nevis. Carice, over to you.
Hi everyone. So as Ms. Stacy said, my name is Carice. I'm from the beautiful Twin Island Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. My journey in terms of climate justice started actually with the academy. So my mom sent me the form. She told me, I think this is something that you'll be good for. Sign up for it, and I did. What I can say is that prior to CCJLA, my knowledge on climate change was not as extensive as it is now. So I would like to thank Island Innovation, specifically CCJLA and Ms. Stacy, for affording me the opportunity to have a more vast understanding of climate change. What I was able to do was have a business called Clutched, and it is where I use materials from different tailors, seamstresses on the island, and also cloth stores to create bags. So whether it be leather, satin, cotton, it's scrap material that I use to create bags. So that is one of the things that I do in terms of sustainable fashion. And I also try to incorporate sustainable fashion in my main business, which is Impressive Designs. So I try to ensure that my clients bring accurate fabric, I don't waste any material, those type of stuff. I also try to reuse. This is my mom's jacket. I try to be as sustainable as possible. And I came to COP, trying to have a better understanding of what sustainability was, and what I got from COP was a better understanding of what climate change on a whole was. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and yeah, looking forward to the next one.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Carice. And I think it's great that you are embracing the arena of sustainable fashion, because I think many people underestimate the negative effects to the climate that the phenomenon of fast fashion has, where there's so many clothes that are discarded and not reused, and also the use of water in creating lots of different clothes and not using a more sustainable method of production. So thanks for drawing that to our attention. So we're going to turn to Dejay from the Cayman Islands. Tell us a bit about your journey so far into the climate justice space.
Hi everyone, my name is Dejay Lyons. I am studying global development and sustainability at Basketball University. But my journey with climate justice actually started a couple years ago, but I didn't realize what it was. So I had the opportunity to be the vice president of a youth-led organization called Protect Our Future. And we had a huge campaign that was going against the proposal of a cruise birthing facility that would have decimated coral reefs on my island. So we did protesting, we did meetings with our local government, international governments, but we also had the opportunity to speak to some of the biggest cruise execs in the world, including Royal Caribbean, the Disney cruise line, you name it, we probably spoke to them. And I can greatly say that we were successful in our quest to help not let that project be fulfilled. So that was my first experience with climate justice. But unfortunately, at the time, I didn't even know what climate justice was. So similar to Carice, I got exposed to the term climate justice through this academy. And as Carice said, you know, all of us, not to speak for all of us, but it's been such an amazing opportunity for all of us delegates, as well as the people who took the academy, which is 39 of us from all over the Caribbean. So it's been a great experience, and I'm so excited to continue with the rest of the panel and hear from the rest of the ladies.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ajay. And you did bring up that question of, yeah, what exactly is climate justice? And it's a really evolving and dynamic area of law. And we know that justice has to do with restitution. It has to do with making things that are wrong, make them right again. And with climate justice, the focus is on a more restorative form of justice, that we have to look at those impacted by the climate crisis, particularly those in marginalized communities that are impacted adversely and impact in a way that is disproportionate to the way they've contributed to climate change. We have to look at creating a world and an ethos where this can be made right again. So I'm going to turn now to our incredible panelist from Aruba, Oriana.
Hi.
Tell us a bit more.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Stacy, and thank you to Extreme Hangout for this panel discussion. I'm from Aruba. I am a policy advisor at the Department of Nature and Environment, and I have a degree in ecology, marine resources management, and aquaculture. I've worked in alternative livelihoods in Madagascar, and I've also worked in fisheries in Alaska and Bonaire. So I've been around the world with regards to nature conservation and the use of natural resources. So my journey pretty much started with environmental justice. I was always interested in environmental justice cases, and there was a calling for climate justice as well. But as my previous panelists had said, I also did not have much information on what exactly is climate justice. And when the opportunity came through Island Innovation and Open Society Foundation with this academy, I jumped on it as soon as I could because I was pretty much at the edge of the youth category. I'm exiting this youth category next year, so I had to grab the opportunity as it came. And through the academy, I learned a bit more, as Stacy expressed, what is climate justice and what does it entail, and what does that mean for island nations that are overseas territories of mainland Europe in my case. So Aruba forms part of the Dutch Kingdom, and on that front, we are on the donor side when it comes to climate finance. So this is a very interesting discussion that we are having within the kingdom. It was great to also meet people from other islands within the Dutch kingdom that are also struggling with this discussion, which was my friend here, Riddy, from St. Martin. And yeah, that's where I am right now with regards to climate justice.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that, Oriana. I think when we look at it, we don't realize, I can see from some of what you're saying, you don't realize that you are actually active in the climate justice space because you're seeking to create a more equal footing for those affected by the climate crisis. So we really appreciate that. So we'll go on to Riddy from St. Martin. Please, Riddy, tell us about yourself and what kind of thing you're doing here in the Climate Justice Academy.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me here in Extreme Hangouts. I think I've been a conservationist when I was younger. In the Caribbean, I mentioned this before, it's very easy to start doing beach cleanups because we all have community service hours that we need to fill, and it's actually quite common for a young person in the Caribbean to have participated in at least one beach cleanup. But do you know that that is part of a wider dialogue, whether that's climate change or climate justice? I think the answer will be no. We often don't associate ourselves with this, I want to say, lingo and terminology. And I actually have, for the pretty much of my undergrad, studied the science climate science. I wanted to understand why are small islands so disproportionately vulnerable? What makes our geographic location, what makes the remoteness, the energy dependency, I wanted to understand these questions, but from, I think, a more research perspective, not from a socio-economic perspective. It was only when I went to a camp organized by Greenpeace in Tunisia did I ever hear the term climate justice. And people ask me, are you a climate justice advocate? And I always used to be like, no, I'm a climate change advocate, you know? And when you learn the nuances of the terms, you realize that we're in a position that is at a disadvantage. And what we're doing is just asking to be heard on the right platforms and to seek out aid in order to survive. And whether you call that climate science, climate change, climate justice, it all kind of falls into one at a certain case, because we're all here today convening to have our voices be heard. And like Oriana touched, I think we're really here to push the awareness of small island developing states that are not sovereign, that are connected to a member state, and do not have a voice of their own, or access to funds to really cope with the changing of the climate.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for that. And I think even here on the stage, you mentioned, Oriana, that, this is your last year in the youth category. I won't say how long ago I exited the youth category, but I will say that to have you all here with your young voices and coming from regions that, we're small islands, this is a very powerful evolution in climate justice, because justice is about having your voice heard and about telling your story. And that, to me, is a huge advancement. I have not heard of so many young people together who you've learned so much from each other, I know, in this time. So I'd like to kind of move on a little bit now and talk about how, we've talked about, I think inspiring hope is a very important thing. That's a message we've heard. What challenges do you think they are in your regions or where you come from to hope, that young people are going to feel the pressure of the climate crisis? I'll start again on this side with Rady, if that's okay, and go that way. Okay, go ahead. Carice, sorry. my apologies. My apologies.
It's okay. Okay. So in terms of hope for the region, I can speak to St. Kitts and Nevis. We have to look at a different approach that we take in terms of identifying or basically saying what climate change is or what climate justice is. So one of the things that I realized at COP that gave me actually hope to go back home and reinvent the ideology of what climate change is to bring awareness to what climate change is. So I know that I'm here, I'm present, I'm able to speak on sustainable fashion. I have the opportunity to interact with my other colleagues as well and learn what their passions are. But there are persons back home who don't have that opportunity. There are persons back home who don't have that understanding of what climate change is, and knowing that, it's not just, cleaning the beaches or reducing and reusing and recycling. It's more than that. So in terms of hope, I would like to tell them that they can take a different approach. It doesn't just have to be, cleaning the beaches. It can be something that they do. So, possibly going to the stores that have recyclable bags that allows them to do recyclable takeout. Just doing something simple. Since I've been at COP, I've heard persons talk about what they can do for the future, renewable energy, biodiversity, but in terms of what we can do now, I don't think that the discussion is as vast as I would like it to be. So I would like to speak on the now and speak on how the average person can assist in the climate justice, the climate fight, and just be better. So that is my goal for when I return home, to create awareness, have education. I would also like to call on my colleagues to assist as well. I know we're far, but I don't think this will be the end of us. I think that we would stay connected. I have started speaking to persons back home to ensure that this kicks off for 2024 and ensure that there is awareness as to climate change, but also allowing them to know that, you don't have to stay in St. Kitts and Nevis. You can venture out as well and also be at COP next year if you so desire. So, yes.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Carice. And from what I understand from what you're saying, I can see that there is this idea of feeling overwhelmed as if you can't really do anything because you're just one person. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, right? Each simple act will help, particularly when we consider the collective impact of whatever you do. So I think that's really important to bear in mind. And of course, raising awareness that that's a challenge. I think that there isn't enough access to really pertinent information. So I'd like to move on to Dejay. Can you tell us a little bit again, what do you perceive as some challenges to inspiring hope back home?
I think for the Cayman Islands, we're in a really unique situation at the moment because we have one law that's already implemented and one law that's on the way. So the first one that's implemented is the National Energy Policy, which was established in 2017, which has very ambitious goals in terms of how the Cayman Islands will be 100% renewable one day. The second one is the climate change policy that is currently on its way to being accepted in cabinet and parliament and then implemented, which we'll probably see at the beginning of next year. With those two laws, it's a lot of positivity because obviously that means our government is trying to support a sustainable future for the Cayman Islands. However, on the other hand, we do have a lack of climate education just island-wide. And that, I think, is where a lot of our people are finding hopelessness in the fight against the climate crisis. In our curriculum, or in the national curriculum of the Cayman Islands, there's nowhere where it says it's mandatory to teach kids about the climate crisis, but there's also just a lack of general understanding against various different generations. I think a lot of the time that when we talk about climate education, obviously as youth, we're sitting here, we know how important it is to educate youth about the climate crisis, but we forget that there's a whole other group of people that also need to be educated because this is something that have been left out of their curriculums as well. And I find that when people do start learning about the climate crisis, obviously put within that you can fall underneath eco-grief, eco-depression, eco-anxiety. But then there's also this thing of hopelessness that we do not have anything mandatory yet in legislation to say that this is what we need to do in order to move forward as the Cayman Islands. So that's kind of what's creating a bit of hopelessness within my island. However, there are a lot of groups in the Cayman Islands that are advocating for different types of sustainability, whether that be mangrove protection, plastic pollution policies or single-use plastic policies, just a sustainable development plan. So a lot of people are advocating and trying to create hope within our communities. So you always have this bit of juxtaposition. It's like you feel hope and then you feel hopeless, but then you're hopeful and then you fall into an eco-depression. So it's kind of hard, but hopefully within time it'll become more hopeful than hopeless. So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I think we tend to forget that the climate crisis has physical as well as mental and psychological effects. And of course, because these psychological and mental effects are not as visible, we tend to forget also that they can also be long-term and cause a great deal of discomfort amongst our young people. So I really thank you for drawing that to our attention. So Oriana, over to you. What would you say is a kind of a challenge in Aruba?
Identity. That's one of the challenges because through having a complicated historical past that is related to colonization, we were, as a people, stripped of our identity. So what happens is then that generally that means that we have a tendency of wanting to copy what other countries do because it's already proven, like whether it be technologies or other actions of adaptation or mitigation with regards to climate change. And that is a major drawback because then we are following a perception of development that is socially accepted and socioeconomically accepted, that might not work for an island that is affected by sea level temperature rise, which is affecting like the basis of our economy, which is sand and sea. So in that regard, we need to have a better understanding within the kingdom of our colonial past, what that means as a culture for the peoples on the islands, and complement the aspect of copying other technologies and implementing them. We have to complement with a bit more creativity and self-resilience through finding our own identity in this rhetoric. And a great example of what happens due to this loss of identity is that youth are stimulated to study abroad and stay abroad. Because that's where the opportunity lies, right? You get your degree in a Western country abroad, and then you can pay off your debt by working in those countries. You have better opportunities there. Yet, because of the lack of activities, businesses that are meant to sustain social life and just feed the needs of the people, the local population, there is a ton of opportunity on the islands to just develop creatively. So in that sense, my message of hope is come back to the islands when you get your degree and try to find where you can contribute to our societies. So the way I do that is that apart from working for the government as a policy advisor, I also have a small syntropic agroforestry project. So I combine forestry development in a semi-arid climate with food production and food security. So I do that also with my community. We started a movement about a year ago, and we've been working in urban gardens by implementing these systems in people's gardens. And that's an indirect way of making cities greener. And that is offering many co-benefits like hotspots of biodiversity, urban cooling, carbon sequestration, soil quality enhancement, water retention capacity enhancement of soils. It's like there are many benefits that come with that. And in my project, I'm looking mainly for partners that can help me with research so that I can also prove that these co-benefits are existing. So yeah, that's a way that we can have hope in our communities.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that you pointed to two very pertinent topics. One is the idea that we seek to copy a model of development that's not relevant or beneficial to us as islands. And we see that, I know in Barbados where I live, we see that in the concept of there's a certain structure, type of house called a chattel house. And it's unique in that it first came into being when slaves were emancipated. They didn't own the land that they lived on, so they had a house that could move like it was a piece of property. And these houses are actually really incredibly designed with passive cooling systems so that wind can pass through and keep them cool, and their roofs are actually more resilient and more resistant to hurricanes and strong winds. But we are moving towards a more Western type of development where no one wants to live in a wooden house. It's associated with poverty and low socioeconomic status, even though it makes a lot more sense. It's cooler. So people live in, build these houses that are very expensive to cool and then also are more vulnerable, ironically, in hurricanes. So we see that we really need to pay attention to our heritage and then brain drain.
Yeah.
We lose so much of the hope in the young people when they do move away. So we really do advocate that there is so much happening where you're from, and there's lots of opportunities for sustainable development. Okay, so really we'd love to hear from you in terms of, what's happening back home.
It's hard to follow because Oriana was so elegant and so were my counterparts on this panel. What? Maybe I'll sit in the beginning next time. Being the end panelist is tough. I'm so lucky and so grateful to be part of this cohort, to learn from each and every one of you. I think one of my call to actions really is building this regional cooperation, specifically amongst youth. One of the questions I tend to ask myself a lot is, why has the Pacific climate movement been so successful? Why have they been able to mobilize a regional voice? Why have they been able to bring all sectors of the economy, of people, indigenous and professionals and youth, all at the seat at the table, at the heart of it, to really share their message with the world that they are affected so deeply by a changing climate. And my hope and dream is for the Caribbean region to do that. We are so rich, we are so deeply entrenched in very similar histories. While it may be different colonial pasts, we share so many similarities of culture, of grit, of resilience, and more than anything, what we do share is the same effects: rising sea levels, ocean acidification, hurricanes, flooding, lack of critical infrastructure to cope with these more intense, more frequent climate shocks and disturbances. We are single pillar economies that are incredibly reliant on tourism. We've all developed on this previous paradigm of massive urbanization, mass tourism, and we all really need to work together to have that forward vision for our region, not just for ourselves because we are in the climate crisis today, but for the generations to come after us. So my message of hope really is for a defragmented Caribbean region to come together, to have one collective voice, despite our geopolitical boundaries, despite our pasts of sovereignty versus non-sovereign entities. And like we all mentioned, specifically, coming back home, one of the biggest barriers for young people is this disenfranchised feeling of not having space, not having the jobs, being too overqualified. I think we've all heard that. And we need political will. We really need political will paired with vision. And I think that is my message of hope, that political will doesn't always need to come from politicians. Youth and people in this space like yourself really have the power here to guide the conversation and to be heard. So that's my hope. This cohort is my hope.
Oh, thank you. Well, I mean, it couldn't get much more eloquent than that. That was really fantastic, Rudy. Thank you. And I love that you do point to things that are very relevant. When you talk about things like, this focus on that single pillar economy, which is tourism, and that sometimes that is as a result of our colonial past. I know the islands I'm from, there has been kind of a wiping out of indigenous forms of agriculture and an emphasis on monoculture, and for us it's in the form of sugarcane, which leads to a lack of biodiversity, and it leads to this weakening of infrastructure in terms of agriculture and food security. I mean, in Barbados they import it's approximately 90% of the food, so we're extremely dependent on external sources of food, and that's something that just we have to change. And even investing in agriculture, that's a form of climate justice, because you mentioned again, Oriana, you mentioned carbon sequestration, and having a more diversified agriculture lends to better soil and then increases food security. So it's a positive cycle. Yeah. So what I will do then, Rudy, I'll ask you first since you're over there, and we'll write this in justice. We'll ask you first. So what do you consider then the next stage? What's next for you in your quest for climate justice?
Oh, I'm so excited. I think COP has both energized me and taken the life out of me at the same time. One of the things that I think I'm really trying to do is not just build regional dialogue amongst youth in the Caribbean, but also strengthen the regional dialogue amongst, the Dutch kingdom, not just the islands within the kingdom in the Caribbean, but also youth who are in European member states. I think that co-facilitation of, let's say, UK youth and UK overseas countries and territories, and the Dutch youth with, bridging those identities and having that open dialogue, I'm really excited to build that bridge. And another thing that I'm really excited about is to take this message home. And one of the things we talked about is how privileged we are to be here. And I don't want to keep taking up this space because I know that there needs to be more youth from the Caribbean here. There needs to be more awareness and more people who have access to this information to bring their insights that I could not have even perceived. We all come here and have this idea to share our voice, but we realize that that in and of itself is a bias that we have, right? And we need more voices at the table to bring in the perspectives that we forget. So those are the two things I'm excited to do. Bring this message home, share it with those who are not here, and then build that gap between, us and our European counterparts and youth, build that regional dialogue and youth dialogue.
Thank you. Thanks. Those are awesome next steps. So over to you, Erin. What's next for you? What are your next steps on this journey?
I'm going to support Riddy.
Good.
That's a bait, that's for sure. And then the next bit is with regards to the identity aspect and informing people that they should come back because there are many opportunities. We just have to be creative about them and believe in ourselves. It has to do with also creating spaces where people can participate in dialogue, right? Whether it be youth or other people that are marginalized within the community.
Definitely.
So in that aspect, I will continue pushing for the ratification and signing of the Escazú Agreement, which is an agreement that promotes information sharing, transparency, public participation in environmental justice matters, specifically for the Caribbean and Latin America. So that will be another part of the projects that I'll be doing. I'll also take these various presentations and dialogues back to my politicians, to my government. Just prepare a report with what are things I've gathered from this experience and inform on this this dialogue that we want to continue within our within the kingdom with our EU counterparts, and see where we can go from there. Where can I support my government in this? So that's going to be the next step for now, and also focus on upscaling my project. That'll be the next bit. So there are like four major activities that I'll be busy with next year.
That's awesome, and that's good because both you and Riddy have shown us that COP is great, but what about after? How do you make sure that you keep the momentum going, not necessarily at the same hectic pace, but can settle down and make some long-term plans and put some long-term visions into effect? So thank you for that. Jay, next for you on the agenda.
I have a lot.
Good.
So I'm definitely going to try and pick and choose what I'm going to talk about right now because I know we're limited on time. But as my OT sisters over here have been explaining, it's really difficult for us in terms of resources, and even being able to access COP has been really difficult for anybody who's a part of a OC's territory. For those of you who don't know, the Cayman Islands is a British overseas territory, so we fall under the United Kingdom. And for us, we are actually limited in badges. I'm proud to say that this year, the UK actually provided its overseas territories with 26 badges, which was such a great accomplishment compared to previous years. However, those badges are only limited to politicians, which is great because they're supposed to be here. But the other issue is we actually don't even have any negotiating power within COP. So one of my goals is actually to figure out, one, how can we get more OT passes as a whole, even though I'm not from the Kingdom of the Netherlands or from the French overseas territories, or I still believe as overseas territories we definitely need to come as a united front because we have similar political and socioeconomic struggles. So I think that's something important for me to just figure out, how can we get a seat at the table in negotiations to make sure these overseas territories' voices are actually being represented, but also how can we get more people like us into COP, whether that's through more organizations, whether that's through other party badges. It's just trying to figure out those logistics, but that's something I really want to focus on because it wasn't until this year that I really realized how silent our voices have been over the past couple of COPs. Now we're definitely getting louder, but we still have a really long way to go. So that's definitely something I do want to focus on. And the second major thing I want to focus on is definitely climate education in the Cayman Islands. I think you heard earlier how passionate I was about that. I think, like I said, a lot of groups are neglected in climate education because people think that education is just for our youth, but it's not. So I want to figure out how can we get legislation in the Cayman Islands to ensure that climate education is being shared amongst our islands, all three of them, not just the biggest island, because often our sister islands also get neglected, which is not fair. So those are my two main projects. I'll stop there for now.
Okay, but I know to be continued. I know we'll keep hearing about you, so that's awesome. Okay, Carice, what's next for you in the journey of Clutched?
Well, I can say my colleagues, they're very ambitious because the first thing I'm going to do when I get home is sleep. Guys. But in terms of what's next for me, it's climate awareness. So the St. Kitts Nevis Pavilion hosted a conversation last week questioning whether we are ready for a sustainable island state. Long story short, it is clear to see that we have some ways to go. So I do want to bring awareness to my fellow Kittitians and Nevisians, allowing them to know, okay, this is the goal. This is what the government would like to do. This is what we would like to do. But you can also do your part in terms of, being educated on it as well. I also would like to see sustainable fashion be more present for COP29. So that is definitely my goal as well. I think my colleagues are literally fed up of hearing me say, there's not much sustainable fashion. So I would like that to be present next year as well. So I would go on an agenda, I'll say, to make it more aware, so that persons can say, okay, we have to speak about this when we come. I know there were conversations about financing and what's not, but there can also be conversations about, how can you reduce your carbon emissions? I know we say 1.5 to stay alive, and we look at the long-term goal, but we can also look at the now. So that is definitely one of the things that I would like to do. For Clutched, I would like to host classes so that persons are aware that, it's not just coming to me and buy, but you can also create for yourself as well. And I would also like other designers to know that they can participate in sustainable fashion. It's as simple as just reducing the amount of cloth that you produce. So if you're looking to create a jumpsuit and the person is size large, get exactly 2 yards and not 2.5 yards. So it's as simple as that. So yeah, I do look forward to collaborations as well, not just in terms of sustainable fashion, but I know persons back home, they are very advocate about speaking on sarcasm, youth, gender inequality. So taking a holistic approach in terms of the awareness. So that is definitely my goal. Collaboration and awareness.
If I just may add.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to wear,
Yeah,
Carice.
we're so ready.
Yeah. And I'm
ready
so
to
excited
support you.
I'm so sorry. I'm really excited to wear one of your items, and then I hope we can get, a special rate as part of the cohort.
Oh my gosh, definitely. Friends and family this year.
Thanks so much for that. Thank you. Well, I'm going to look to begin to wrap it up now. I mean, I could keep talking with these amazing young people forever. So I'll be in touch with you all the time. I'm so heartened by the friendships that we've made here, over this time. So I'd like now actually to open up if there are any questions from the audience, if anyone has any questions or comments. I'm sure a mic can get to them if necessary. Anyone?
There's one over there.
Not seeing. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I was interested by the comment in regards to the Pacific. So I'm from Australia, and I guess the relevance of the islands to the north of and northeast of the country. Yeah, it's pretty important and impactful, but then a lot of the policy is driven towards the mainland and minerals as a major part of our economy, which does go a little bit counter to the efforts to improve things for the islands. So I think in your own backyard you look at things being not so good. So I was interested by that comment and maybe some perspectives as to why you view the Pacific as having achieved something that you say you haven't yet. Because, as I say, you kind of look at your own setting and you don't think things are doing that well. So it's interesting to hear outside perspective.
Hey, Rudy, would you like to speak a bit more?
Yeah. So last night I actually went to the Moana Pacific Pavilion along with Oriana. And we were invited to attend this, I think it's like a wala. I don't know actually the correct term, but it was a series of performances by youth from different islands, from Tonga, the Kingdom of Tonga, the last kingdom in the Pacific, by youth from Tuvalu, Vanuatu, Samoa, and while there were several different sovereign entities in the Pacific, they all celebrated one another, encouraged each other in one space. And that was almost a trickle-down effect in how they chose to represent themselves in solidarity at the global and international platform, right? To bring so many youth to pay for those tickets from so far away in order to make a point, to show solidarity, almost felt very inspiring. And I think quite often, if it weren't for island innovation, a lot of us young people from the Caribbean wouldn't find ourselves in one cohort from different parts of the Caribbean region. And there are certain instances where we really do relish and celebrate each other, like Carnival is one aspect where you really see Caribbean people coming together and celebrating each other in this spirit. But that spirit sometimes for me, in my experience, hasn't really trickled down to regional policies. So when we look at attacking the climate crisis and looking at the similarities we face, like energy dependency, food insecurity, water scarcity, I wonder what strength we might have if we were regionally to collaborate on a offshore wind energy project, to combine our resources to mitigate those risks together. There are several opportunities within the region that, because of our geopolitical, our geopolitical and sovereign versus non-sovereign territories, we often don't see that dialogue happening. And honestly, in the Pacific, that is also the case. There are French territories that are not as included in the Pacific voice, like New Caledonia, Wallis and Futuna, and even French Polynesia, because they're associated with France. They're like, oh, you're European, so go to your member state. And I think in some cases we feel the same way. I'd love for other people to chime in.
Yeah.
I can. I actually had a group of Caymanians and myself included had a conversation with people from Tuvalu a couple days ago. And first of all, the conversation was amazing, and I ended up learning a lot from them. But during the conversation, it was almost like a cultural exchange and historical exchange of what our islands have been going through. And it was even then in explaining what's been going on in Cayman and the Caribbean that they even felt like there's been a lot more solidarity amongst each other. And that's what they verbalized to me. So, I mean, even if the solidarity isn't happening in policies, maybe it's more so solidarity in the identity, solidarity in the actions, solidarity amongst the people, because maybe sometimes solidarity amongst governments is going to be a little bit different. Every country is going to have its own priorities because they're sovereign, in this case that we're talking about. But for them, in that moment, when we were speaking to them about what we were experiencing in the Cayman Islands and the Caribbean region as a whole, they felt even more grateful for what was going on in the Pacific, because they did feel very united amongst each other. So for me, I know that because that's what I've been told from them, but that's also a perspective from people from Tuvalu. So, I guess it just depends on how you look at it. But I see your point, and I see Riddy's point, but that's also what I've heard, and even just being here, that's what I've seen. The fact that they have a Pacific pavilion.
Oh.
that in itself should show you the strength within that region. The Caribbean countries here all have different pavilions. Bahamas has one, Barbados has one, like Trinidad and Tobago has one.
Yeah,
You-
CARICOM has
right.
very,
So
very segregated.
it's all separate versus this one Pacific pavilion. And it was so powerful to sit in there this morning and see actually a collaboration between the Pacific and the Caribbean, and having Pacific Islanders tell the Caribbean Islanders that we will figure out a way to collaborate and figure out a way to help you guys create these connections. So, yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, yeah, there is. And then also, from a jurisprudential and legal point of view, we did have the Pacific Island Students Fighting for Climate Change. That was an organization that came together and successfully brought a case for the International Court of Justice for them to formulate an advisory opinion about the link between the environment and human rights. So to link the kind of quality of life and the human rights of Pacific Islanders to climate change. And that was that was quite a groundbreaking legal case, and that was brought by a collaboration between different Pacific islands. So it was really huge. So that's why we're saying we want to get to that level of collaboration. So there's a lot happening, and Carice is going to add to that.
Yeah.
But it has a lot to do with identity as well. So, you can always, from a fashion perspective, you can always identify them by the bright colors that they wear, or the type of shirt, or their skirts. And it's a case where for the Caribbean, we don't have that. But we also have an internal discourse in terms of identity. So she's Caymanian, I'm Nibijan, but I'm from an island called St. Kitts and Nevis. And if you call me a Kittian, I'll be offended. So it has a lot to do with the internal identity as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, any other questions, comments from anyone? Okay, at this point, I will look to wrap up what I think is an incredible session. I don't want to leave the Extreme Hangouts. I want to stay for a while. It's really nice in here.
We're extremely hanging.
Yeah, we're having a fantastic time, and we're going to take this experience of COP. I heard a comment, we were talking amongst ourselves, that when you're from the outside and, back home and hearing about what's happening at COP, it's easy to feel disillusioned, but when we're here, the levels of human connection and the sense of hope and the sense of motivation that drives us, for us, it's been predominantly positive. So thanks very much to Extreme Hangout for having us hang out here. This is really great. Thank you all so much for coming as well, to the audience. Thanks to our panelists.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I get the great honor of being able to introduce our next storyteller of the day. His name is James Elsmore, and he is a social entrepreneur with a key focus on renewable energy, climate change, and sustainable development for remote, rural, and island communities. He is the founder of Island Innovation and a digital nomad, traveling to over 60 countries. He now specializes in the implementation of the SDGs for small island developing states such as the Caribbean and the Pacific Islands. He brings together governments, NGOs, and universities in the private sector, promoting the transition to clean energy. Let's please give James a huge round of applause and a great welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We're almost there. I know it's been a long few weeks, so thank you for being here on this Sunday. I think it's still Sunday afternoon. Thank you very much for that introduction, and it was great to see in the previous session the amazing group of young people who have joined as part of the Caribbean Climate Justice Leadership Academy. I've been very proud to be supporting this group of activists over the last 2 weeks and have learned so much from them as well as a leader in that program. So I want to just tell a little bit of a story. This session is, the title of the session is What the Most Remote Islands Teach Us About Sustainability. And I thought I'd start off with a little bit of a story to tell you why I ended up working in this area. So a few years ago, I was in Samoa, and every few days I walked down to the docks in Apia, the beautiful capital of that South Pacific island nation. And I was trying to make the onward journey to one of the most remote regions in the world, the territory of Tokelau. This remote archipelago is the epitome of what you might imagine if you think of Polynesia: beautiful sandy beaches, peaceful lagoons, and a very welcoming community. And I was on a mission to get to these islands, knowing that relatively few outsiders ever made the trip, given the extreme time commitment necessary to make it there and the uncertain transportation schedules. The only way to reach Tokelau is by boat. There's no airport, and the 3 atolls of Atafu, Whakaofu, and Nukunono each have around 500 people living on them. But it seemed that I'd been particularly unlucky, as I'd arrived on the islands in the transitional period where the infrequent ferry, the MV Tokelau that serviced the islands, had been pulled into retirement. I'd heard stories from the islanders about the precarious ship's problems and their pleas to the New Zealand government that administers the islands to provide a safer replacement. And unfortunately, a more modern ship was on the way, but unfortunately for me, it had not yet arrived. So in all, I spent almost a month in Samoa waiting to try and take this boat onto Tokelau, and in the end, I didn't even make it there. The reality of living in such an extreme location, right? And that might sound like an extraordinary amount of time for a failed mission, but for me, it was worth it because for me, it was worth it. And for many of the Tokelauans waiting alongside me, this was just a fact of life, of living in such remote location. And there's certainly worse places to spend a month or so than Samoa, and I had the luxury of time up to a point. But for me, it was worth the minor inconvenience of being stranded because I was interested in Tokelau's pioneering project, the Tokelau Renewable Energy Project, to become the world's first solar-powered nation. This was back in 2012. This was a noble effort to turn the islands to 100% solar power and replace the 1,500 barrels of diesel fuel that were imported every year with this cleaner source. And I wanted to understand how was this remote community, one of the most remote communities in the world, able to become one of the pioneers and a leader in sustainable energy. So in 2012, Tokelau had embarked on this ambitious mission to break free from its dependence on imported fossil fuels. The islanders joined forces with international organizations to implement an impressive solar power system. The photovoltaic panels and batteries were installed, and a visionary movement was made that changed not just the energy landscape, but daily life for the locals living there. The Tokelau's reliance on costly and environmentally harmful fossil fuels dwindled, and this led to a substantial financial savings and increased resilience for the islands. This shift to solar energy was also not just illuminating a path for sustainability for Tokelau, but also for other nations to follow. And it really changed life by giving, for the first time ever, 24-hour access to electricity for all the islanders, which, as you can imagine, is absolutely revolutionary. But this story had reminded me of another small island, which on the surface might seem a complete world away. But situated in the Inner Hebrides of Scotland, the Isle of Eigg is special, like Tokelau, in that it also pioneered its own energy transition. Both islands had overcome major challenges to become pioneers to demonstrate that actually a community could be almost entirely powered by renewable energy. And actually in Eigg, back in the 1990s, they were dealing with unreliable and very costly diesel generators, and they embarked on their own vision for energy self-sufficiency. The people of Eigg turned adversity into opportunity, and they harnessed wind, water, and solar to become themselves 100% renewable energy powered. And the Isle of Eigg is a success. The Isle of Egg's success is a testament to the power of this local collaboration and community-led projects in renewable energy, that even the most isolated regions can make this transition. So then what connects Eigg, the Isle of Eigg, with Tokelau? These two geographically remote islands on opposite sides of the world. Well, it's not just this transition, but it's the remarkable capacity for the revolution to happen in what might seem the most unexpected of places. But actually, why should this be unexpected? Islanders are, at nature, innovative. And here we have an opportunity to compare two different examples that ended up following a similar path. Now, I've been very fortunate to make a career from working with island communities and building so-called digital bridges to share stories and find ways to collaborate and learn from one another. And over the last decade, I've had the privilege to travel to hundreds of islands around the world on every continent. Now, you might think, of course, that Hawaii, Fiji, Tasmania, Barbados, and the Shetland Islands are quite different, and that is totally true. But there is a common strand and common stories that connect them, whether it's challenges around energy, a dependence on tourism, difficulties with waste management, or, of course, vulnerability to climate change. You might be surprised at how much such a diverse selection of islands have in common. Beyond the obvious differences in culture, in climate, in government, they share these many different features. And I started this organization, Island Innovation, in order to help build networks for islands to share resources and be able to learn from one another to build sustainable development pathways that work for them. As a purpose-led group calling for more representation of islands and recognition of island issues, we provide a platform to bring together island stakeholders at events like this in order to learn from each other's experiences. So this idea of a global community of islands is something that really could have only emerged in the internet age. These places that have built a community connected together by remoteness. Now, to give you a few other examples of pioneering new efforts from islands around the world, the Azores Archipelago in Portugal has created a framework for sustainable tourism to ensure the islands are not degraded by mass tourism as many other places have. Rapa Nui, formerly known as Easter Island in the South Pacific, has created world-leading programs to help protect their indigenous culture and language. In Jamaica, a barrier has been placed across the harbor to collect plastic waste leaving the city and prevent it from drifting into the ocean. And at the University of Malta, a leading program for the study of islands offers scholarships to islanders from around the world to come and learn from each other and exchange these opportunities. You can see Stacey getting very excited as a student in that program from Barbados. Now, this is what makes islands so important. The tight-knit nature of different island communities fosters collaborative problem solving, and these islands can show the power of human ingenuities when put in extreme situations. Paradoxically, it's these extreme challenges that drive innovation. And whether it's a global pandemic, climate change, or the price of oil, the unfortunate reality is that it's island communities that bear the brunt of these global problems, are then forced to find the solutions first, and in the end, shine a pathway for everyone else to follow. But what can these stories from islands teach us about innovation? Islands are often seen as microcosms of unique challenges, but they can be living labs to demonstrate innovative solutions that demand creative problem solving. In a world where sustainability and environmental concerns, as we can see here, are heavy on our minds, it's time to reframe our perception of islands, not just as a place for your holidays. They're a place they're centers of dynamic innovation when it comes to climate solutions, and they can offer invaluable insights into overcoming the constraints that face all of us. So from renewable energy to waste management, islands can really demonstrate that innovation born out of necessity can lead to remarkable breakthroughs. These successes offer hope and inspiration to the wider world, signaling that with determination, collaboration, and a creative spirit, we can tackle even the most pressing challenges of our times. So, as we conclude our journey through these island stories, let us remember the lessons from the Isle of Egg, the lessons from Tokelau, that extend far beyond their shores. These islands are lighthouses of innovation. They shine a spotlight on these major global challenges that will affect all of us. But by recognizing the leadership of islands and the people that live on them, we can empower ourselves to learn, adapt, and apply the innovative spirit to shape a more sustainable and prosperous future for all. So I invite you to join this new global community of islands connected by technology and united in remoteness that can freely share knowledge and resources and learn from one another. Because together we're living in a global community of islands and embracing their shared commitments to build a sustainable future. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I invite you to learn more at islandinnovation.co about the work that we've been doing, including the Caribbean Climate Justice Academy, the Island of Hope, and the other programs at COP. Thank you, Extreme Hangouts, for hosting me.